This is a No Surf Music, Burning River Fireside Chat. With guest, Mary Cutrufello. I'm your host, Jason D. Diesel Hammond. For the best in Americana, alt country, indie rock, and more, point your browser to nosurfmusic.com. So, this is another edition of No Surf Music's Burning River Fireside Chats. This is your host, Jason D. Diesel Hammond, and joining me today is Mary Cutrufello from the great state of Minnesota.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good, Diesel, man. It's good to be back in Cleveland.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're here. We get to see you about once a year. And I actually got to see you a little bit extra this year because you came down to the Wigwam Music Festival in Kentucky with us.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's three days. It's a really cool old motor court with all the rooms shaped like wigwams, and it kind of gets, I have a degree in American Studies, and so I studied a lot of roadside ephemera, and that's as classic a piece of it is still around, and it was a thrill to stay in the wigwam for 3 days, but also just it was a great music festival too. Indeed.
Very, very cool thing. Second year that it's been put on by Jay Johnson, who runs the Honky Tonk House Concert Series. So I definitely will be back next year. I hope you will be too.
If it's at all possible and they'd like to have me, I would love to be back.
Nice. But like you say, you are currently in Cleveland, and we are at the Fairview Tavern where you'll be playing your show tonight. I guess before we discuss the new album that you're going to have, I want to get into your background a little bit for people that don't know.
Sure.
First of all, you were raised in Connecticut.
Yes, born and raised.
Now, when Jay Johnson, aforementioned, introduced you at the Wigwam Festival, he did mention that you have been called the next Bruce Springsteen.
That was a long time ago, but yes.
It may have been, but I think that speaks to your roots because, he's a Jersey boy, you're from Connecticut, one side or the other, New York, basically.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and that was, growing up in that part of the country, you really do get a full dose of Springsteen, especially in the 70s and 80s, and so I guess it's gonna be a part of what I do, doing mainstream, the mainstream rock part of what I do, just because of where I'm from, but also Springsteen really spoke to me as a writer, and as a live performer, and I think those are two parts of my game that I've certainly tried to at least live up to what he put down.
Very good. So, besides Springsteen, what kind of music did you interact with when you were younger?
Well, my parents were big Broadway fans.
Okay.
I mean, they weren't theater people; they were theater goers. So there were dozens of Broadway cast albums in the house, and that was kind of the first music that I listened to. Rodgers and Hammerstein, Stephen Sondheim, that kind of thing. And then, as I got a little bit older, I turned on the radio and I found WNEW, was the big rock station out of New York, and that was my constant companion through my teenage years. So it's a little bit of exactly what you'd expect, and a little bit of maybe not what you'd expect.
Gotcha. Well, I guess on the side of not what you would expect, because you do definitely in your music today have that Heartland rock component that you can see very strongly.
Right.
But there's also a strong Texas influence.
Yes.
And you lived there for a number of years. Can you tell us what drew you to that kind of music?
Well, no, is the short answer. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of it in New England, and it was the bumper music on the Dukes of Hazzard. It was, putting on Hee Haw to annoy my parents. I mean, it's like little things like that, and I guess maybe some of the crossover stuff in the late '70s, where the Kenny Rogers and stuff kind of crept onto mainstream radio, and I don't know. It was just all. There wasn't a whole lot to go on. But when I got to college, I had a band, and I was, just doing a rock thing, and I just kind of was looking for new sounds and new songs and just a different point of view, and I found some Dwight Yoakam, Steve Earle, and Marty Stewart records at the local campus record store, and those were kind of the three artists that got me down that path, and then I just started exploring from there, looking at who wrote the songs, and then trying to find out about them or other artists that were covering songs or doing songs by those writers, and it just kind of, it was more of almost an intellectual curiosity, like a research project at first, and then I really found something I could sink my teeth into.
Very cool. I find that interesting personally because I was very much the same way. I didn't have any exposure to country until after college, in my case, really. I mean, I've been into folk music and stuff in college and all that, so I had, the Carter family and Guthrie and the early country stuff. But, yeah, it took me a while to latch onto it, too. But liking the music and moving to Texas to play music are pretty far apart. So how did you make that leap?
Well, I had to do something. I grew up...
Oh, yeah, you graduated from Yale, and it's like,
I did.
I gotta do something now, right?
I was at a crossroads.
I could get a job, but...
Yeah, everybody was doing that.
Yeah. That was pretty much my philosophy, too.
No, I mean, I grew up in Connecticut. Yale is in Connecticut, and I really wanted to go and see more of this country that I just spent 4 years earning a degree, which kind of says I know something about it. And I had a lot of book learning, but I really wanted to get out there.
Had you traveled at all, really, up until then? Or?
I took a big trip around the country with my parents, with my the whole family.
Gotcha.
The summer before my freshman year in college.
Okay.
And that kind of whet my appetite, but I didn't have the wherewithal to do anything about it other than earn the degree, I guess.
Gotcha.
But then it was like, man, I bought a truck. It's like, man, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna to a completely new area of the country for me, someplace I've never been. I've got something I want to learn. I know where to go to learn it, and this is gonna be like my grad school. Okay. And that was kind of the way I approached it. I wanted to learn what I could learn and learn enough to make a living with what I was learning. That was my goal.
So you ended up in Houston first, is that correct?
No, Austin first.
Austin first,
for about a year and a half.
Okay. And what made you stop there?
Because it's Austin.
There you go. I know it was a pretty obvious question, but
well, no, I mean, there wasn't anything specific. I'd never been to anywhere in Texas before. I mean, it was like Austin city limits. I mean, it just, everything seemed to be emanating from there, and I figured it was as good a place as any to start.
Gotcha. And then why did you decide to change bases to Houston later on then?
Well, because Austin, as much fun as it was and is, it just wasn't enough of a big city for me. I grew up 55 miles from Times Square, and I needed a little bit more hustle bustle and a even though Austin was growing by the day, it had kind of a small town feel, which I know some people think is a good thing, but for me it just felt like an overgrown small town, whereas Houston felt like an actual city. Okay.
And how would you compare the two music scenes at the time? I mean, were there different influences that you got because you moved to Houston, or?
The honky-tonk scene, the country scene was a lot smaller, but the cats there could play. They could really play. There was a cool blues scene there that I didn't dive into too much because blues wasn't kind of why I was there. But a real kind of idiosyncratic blues scene, a bunch of cool players, like Carolyn Wonderland came out of that scene, but also guys like Terry Green that I don't know if they ever really got well known outside of Houston itself. And it's like people were just proud to be from Houston. They didn't really care what happened in other places, or if they went other places, because the scene was nurturing enough as it was. And there's other things going on in Houston. There's a rap scene about which I know less than nothing, and and Tejano, and I mean, it's there's a lot going on. But the country scene, I mean, I lived there because I liked the vibe of the city.
Gotcha.
And I knew all the players, and by the time I moved there, I was playing all over the state, so I spent a lot of time in a lot of places, and I could have really been just about anywhere.
Gotcha. So unique in respect to a lot of the people that we talk to on this show, but not necessarily so unique in respect to Americana at the time that you came up, in that your first two albums were on a major label, correct?
The first, well,
sort of the second one.
I did one myself,
right?
You know, the obligatory one that gets you onto the major label, and I did one for the label.
Okay. But then, you know, the last number of years, however many it's been, you've been mostly doing everything on your own.
Yeah, I've been independent ever since the one for Mercury. Yeah.
Gotcha. So, first of all, I guess, can you tell us just a little bit about what it was like in the early years? I mean, you ended up playing Austin City Limits twice. Mm-hmm. You ended up on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Yes.
You've gotten a lot of opportunities that a lot of other musicians never get.
That's true.
So can you tell us what that was like?
Well, it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. You know, and it was, I don't know if I would say it was a dream come true, because it was just kind of, it was me doing what I do, and you know, I always kind of operated under the assumption that if you do what you do and you do it well, good things will come to you, and that was sort of, you know, what happened. But it was a whole lot of fun, and I get to learn so many things about how the music business works. Most of them good, some of them somewhat unsavory. But you know, it was an education that stood me in good stead going down the road. Just knowing how to do stuff, or just knowing that there's, you know, there's the puzzle fits together in a few different ways. You know, it's not always what it looks like when you're playing a club like the Fairview Tavern.
Gotcha. But then, which label were you on again?
Mercury.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
They ended up merging, as happened to so many other companies at the time.
Yep.
And as happened to a lot of people who sort of play in the genre that you do.
True.
They ended up without a label, essentially, and sort of kicked to the streets. How did you feel when that happened, and how did you make the transition? Well,
first of all, the folks at Mercury, which morphed into Island Def Jam, and became like an urban label. So
you would fit in perfectly, is what
right?
you're saying.
Yeah. They brought in all new people. They didn't know what to do with me. I didn't know what to do with them. But the heads of the label were old rock guys.
Okay.
You know, and so they got what I was doing, but they were like, "Man, we have no resources to do anything with you," and they were nice enough to pay me what they owed me, which was the advance for the second record, which is a significant chunk of change, which they could have been jerks and not done that, but they did. So I can't. I know a lot of people are bitter about their, you know, here and then gone major label experiences, but I'm not. You know, in response to that, I just did what I had been doing all along, which was go back down to Texas and book some gigs. You know, I mean, that was always, like, none of the label stuff really worried me one way or another, because I knew I could always do that. You know, I could always just do what I was doing all along, which was making a decent living, playing gigs and writing songs and just being who I was in Texas, and that was, you know, that turned out to be the case. I mean, people at Mercury lost their jobs. I mean, I basically didn't.
So then, eventually, you decided to move on from Texas, and like I said, you're currently living in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities area.
Yep.
How did you make that decision?
Well, it did seem like at the end of the Mercury deal, it was the end of a chapter in my life musically. Partly because of the deal, but also just, you know, I'd been in Texas almost 10 years, and I felt like I had, you know, accomplished what I set out to do, and I just was looking for just a different point of view, a different look, you know, just a different style of music, and I knew as much about the Twin Cities when I moved there as I did about Texas when I moved there. So you know, there was no, you know, I wasn't chasing anything in particular, but it was one of my favorite stops when we'd come through on the road in the Mercury days, and I'd gotten a few numbers in my book and called them up and made a couple of plans, got a place to crash for a while, and I just headed up there. It was nice. I mean, what was nice for me was that's another great music town. There's world-class players all over, and so I was able to, I wasn't. I mean, there's some places you could move to where that's not the case, and I think I would have been really frustrated trying to do music in a town that doesn't really have a mature scene. So that was, that part was easy, and I had done some high-profile gigs. The times that I had come through, I'd done festivals and stuff. So people already, kind of the music people in town, kind of already knew who I was, which saved a lot of time and getting doors opened and stuff. And I just. I kind of wanted to re-explore the straight rock thing that I grew up with, So, I mean, Minnesota's not the East Coast, obviously, but it is the North, and there's a certain vibe to the way rock music gets played here that is surprisingly difficult to recreate in Texas.
Gotcha.
You would think, rock and roll is kind of our common cultural language, but it was tricky getting people to do a straight up heartland rock thing in a Texas context.
Gotcha. Well, as I presume in some ways it's not necessarily easy in areas like this to get people who want to do straight up country either. I mean,
yes, the reverse is definitely true.
Yeah. So. There's Cleveland's, I'm sure, very similar in that we have a good Americana sort of base going, a good scene, but it's sort of a very underground thing, and if you're not part of it, you don't want to be, kind of,
Well, yeah. I think of from the time that I've spent here, I think the scene's a little bit bigger in the cities, but not much. Okay. I mean, it's still very niche, and I do have a straight country cover side project that I enjoy very much, but there's only a handful of people that I think would be able to do a gig like. It's not my band. I'm just a singer guitar player in it. Mm-hmm. But it's I decided I said I would play with them because they're really good at what they do, and that's not so easy to find. So when they asked me to come do some gigs, I said yeah, because it's the exact opposite of my Texas experience is true, and it's I love that stuff. It's like I'm not born to it, but man, it's a big part of who I am at this late date, and it's so much fun for me, and I think that this has stood me in good stead over the years. It's like if I'm invested and I'm having a good time and the band is having a good time, then you can win over a lot of people that don't think they like whatever they think about what the music is. It's like, oh, I don't like country, but you guys were great. I mean, right. I get that a lot. And it's like, you need to play with conviction and be good at what you do. There you go.
You can kind of be a force of nature then and drag people into your own sphere.
Indeed.
All right. Well, there was a time, however, that you had some health problems.
Yes.
And you were unable to sing for, what was it, a year and a half?
A couple years, yeah.
Okay. So you ended up with a job at FedEx as a delivery person, right?
Indeed.
And that transitions perfectly into talking about your new album, Faithless World, I believe is the title.
Yes, that's the title.
And it's going to come out in July. Mm-hmm. Where's it going to be? I don't know the exact date. You don't either, so it's all good.
No,
but sometime in July, right?
Sometime in July, yeah.
Where's it going to be available when it does come out?
Well, it'll be available at my website, of course, and then for MaryCutrufello.com, yeah, and all of the normal online places you would expect to find it. And
gotcha.
Then, of course, if we happen to be in the same room, I'll have a copy most likely.
There you go. So good excuse to go see you.
There you go.
But the reason that I obviously say that transition from FedEx is because you've put a song on this album that's sort of long been clunking around in your repertoire. But it's just called the FedEx song, right?
It is just called the FedEx song. It is my statement about what it's like to be a FedEx driver in Minnesota in the middle of the winter. And it was something that I'd wanted to write for quite a while. I mean, I've been in the FedEx truck for over 9 years now, and God help me.
You've gotten out occasionally, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There have been long stretches where I moved back to Texas for a year to promote 35.
I just meant literally out of the truck. You said I've been in a FedEx truck.
Well,
I'm just saying.
It's just it feels that way some days. But
Gotcha.
No.
Well, that's what the song's about, basically, right?
Once I'm done with the boxes, they let me go home and sleep.
Nice.
But no, I mean I've done it for a while, and I really wanted to write something because it's good, honest work, but it's hard work, and sometimes that it's hard to explain to people sometimes, and it's whatever they think it is, it's probably not quite exactly that, and I really feel like I've made as definitive a statement about working at FedEx as I'm gonna make. So, and it goes over great, and when I play it live, and it didn't really fit on the last record, which was a kind of slow country thing, but it made perfect sense on this one, which is a little more, it just has a different feel to it.
Right. Well, definitely that song in particular, to me, it felt like it had sort of a high lonesome country feel, but then rock backing. So it sort of was a good example of how you mix the genres in there.
Right on.
But that hasn't always been the case. I mean, you've gone, like you say, from rock albums to country albums. This one seems to vacillate a little bit more back and forth. I mean, it's almost like you have a country song, you have a rock song, you have a country song, Yeah. I mean, just a couple, Promise Into Darkness, I felt, very Springsteen influenced on that.
Yeah.
I mean, Worthy Girl, which we'll talk about again in a second, but I mean, that could have been on Nebraska if perfectly fit in.
Right.
Fool for You, another one, very much Heartland rock influence, it felt to me.
Exactly.
But then on the other side of that, you have, Lonesome in the Wine.
Yep.
I mean, that was just pure country themed, basically ode to the bar pickup, right? I mean,
That's exactly what it is.
And then, the Three Broken Hearts, which is again a classic country love triangle kind of a thing.
That's the love triangle was one of the things that drew me to country music as a songwriter.
Gotcha.
You don't get that in rock so much.
And then another example, Santa Fe Railroad. I mean, basically, like, when you're doing country on this album, you're doing the most country you can find. Like, it's like straight out of George Jones' playbook.
I am not messing around.
Train songs. Yeah.
Train songs, cheating songs, you name it.
Exactly. They're probably could be a little more drinking song. There's some drinking song, but I'm just saying.
I'll just drink while I play them.
There you go. That's a good plan. But let's real quick just talk about a couple of those in particular and give people a preview. The one that really stands out to me is Worthy Girl.
Okay.
It's sort of very dark, kind of twisted sort of take, which I think of sort of when I think of you. You've got that kind of voice where you can, you can take something that could be straight ahead, but then you twist it. It's almost like, on the one hand, it's kind of a love song, but on the other hand, it's a self-hate song. Right.
It's like, I love you so much that you have to leave now.
Exactly.
Is kind of what the protagonist is saying. And,
it's almost like a preemptive rejection.
Right. That's exactly what it is. And this was not something that happened to me. Well, for that matter, it's not the story of anyone. It's just one of these kind of made up out of whole cloth songs. But, I think it's a feeling that, I guess some people live there, but I think everybody has moments of that, and that's, what I try to shoot for as a writer is things that, that we can all relate to on some level, and that's, unfortunately, it's you suffer body blows to your self-worth from time to time, and it's like, of course, what it's really about what you do about that counts, but I don't think that means you shouldn't acknowledge that happens.
Okay. And the one part that I found interesting of that song was you have a little bit of sort of 60s pop harmony backing vocals that pop in just every so often. Was that a purposeful juxtaposition? I'm just wondering how that happens.
There wasn't like a music, I wasn't trying to be a music geek about it. That's G.S. Harper, by the way.
Yes it is. Yes it is.
And, it was an idea, a musical idea I had, and he came out and played bass on the whole record, and he was in there one day, and we were trying some different things, and I said, here, do this, and we kind of just said, okay, and he did it, and I mean, we didn't go, oh, perfect, that's great, but we kind of forgot about it until the end of the recording project, and then we were thinking about getting some other singers in, and Greg said, man, he was looking at the tracks, he said, man, Harper did some stuff on this, let's listen to it, and it turned out we went further with it than we thought. Like, he had done a whole stack of vocals, like 3 parts. And so we plugged him in, and then we started grinning, because it was, the track had evolved to the point where it made more sense than it did on the day that we did the backing tracks.
I gotcha. Yeah, well, to me, the only thing that's more frightening than one G.S. Harper is 3. So I don't know what to do about that, but it's a great song, nevertheless. It's really entertaining. Sort of on the other spectrum, I guess, in some ways, is Fool for You. I mean, that's a love song without so much of the twist, and it's sort of a poppy song, gets right out there and grabs a hold of you. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and the background of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually an older song, and it's fun to play live, but it kind of never found a place on any of the records we were doing for whatever reason. But it's something that I get people going, well, what that song about Fool Free, what record is that on? And it wasn't on one, so we did a really nice version of it, I think, and it would capture the kind of barn burning intensity that we bring to it live, which it doesn't really work if you don't play it like your hair's on fire.
Fair enough. We just had a drive-by fingering by the G.S. Harper.
We got interview bombed.
Funny thing is, I was gonna ask him to come on in and sit in just for the explanation of this next song, but he decided to take off. No. No, that is actually perfect, because I do want to talk just a little bit about GS, because like you said, he came out and did all the bass and a lot of the vocals and all that. And he obviously is a Cleveland native, and that's one of the reasons why you.
Well, he's a San Angelo native, but he's been here for quite a while.
Fair enough. He's a North Coast adoptee, but we'll take him. And he actually is releasing his own album, so he will soon be sitting down for one of these lovely chats.
Excellent.
But specifically, I want to ask you, because you gave him a shout out. Mm-hmm. I believe when he did a guitar solo on "Fool for You,"
"Fools and Lovers,"
or "Fools and Lovers." Yeah, yes, my bad.
The other Fool song.
The other Fool song. That's exactly why I screwed it up. There are 2 Fool songs. However, "Fools and Lovers," G.S. Harper, definitely the former, right? I mean, we just got to get that out of the way.
Oh, he's definitely a fool.
Yeah.
And we are definitely not lovers.
No. But I just, knowing him as well as I do, I thought that was a nice little. Yes. No.
It was, we had that section. There's a section of solos, and we had the banjo player take one, because how often do you have a banjo player in the studio, right? And GS, he's a great bass player, but I think probably most folks listening to this know him as a guitar player. And we just had him pick. I said, here, just take a pass at one of these turns, and kind of the same thing as the vocals. We'll file it away, and when we get around to finishing the song, we'll see what comes in. And he just, as he does, he played his ass off, and so we had to use that. And then, I wanted to make sure that people knew that it was him, because what's probably going to go around is that he played bass on the record, and so you wouldn't necessarily think that somebody taking the guitar lead was GS. So, I did that kind of old timey kind of Ernest Tubb Billy Bird
There you
now,
go.
that kind of thing.
Well, that's what I liked about it, because you see that live a lot, but it doesn't come up in an album.
It rarely
very
comes
much.
up in a studio recording. Yeah.
The other really unique thing about that song was there's sort of a folk a cappella kind of introduction to that one, right?
Yeah.
How did you land on that idea?
That one, I had been, I haven't played that one a lot, but I did it a little bit, and there were times when I had a band with 3 singers, and we worked out the 3-part intro, and for this recording, we got my friends Michael Perry and the Longbeds. Michael Perry is a New York Times best-selling author, and then he's got a band too. He's just a talented cat, and they have a great 4-part blend, and I love what they do, and they hire me every now and then to be their featured guest guitarist. And I said, man, let's just get that blend on the front and just make it, just a little special, like 20 seconds, and that's. So they came in they're over in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and they came in for an afternoon, laid that down. We had a really good, and I'm just happy to have him on the record, because, then I get to talk about him in interviews.
There you go. We are 5 minutes away from showtime, so we better let you go, but thank you so much for joining us. Once again, this Mary Cutrufello, the new album is Faithless Worlds. It'll be out in July at some point. Probably by the time you hear this, it'll be out. And it'll be available somewhere and everywhere. Mary will also be somewhere and everywhere, so check her site, marycutrufello.com. Find out where she's touring, because it really is worth it getting to see her, and I'm glad I'm about to do it once again.
Awesome. Thanks,
All
Jason.
right, well, thank you very much for joining us, and this has been another edition of No Surf Music's Burning River Fireside Chats. This has been a No Surf Music Burning River Fireside Chat. This is your host, Jason D. Diesel Hammett, signing off. Remember, No Surf Music is your source for the best in Americana, alt country, indie rock, and more. For original reviews and interviews, visit nosurfmusic.com.